Dragon Ball Sparking Zero has finally released for the Nintendo Switch 2 and even for the original Nintendo Switch. If you saw my review of the original Switch edition yesterday, then you know that I think it's a magnificent port of a current generation game onto a severely outdated handheld system. But with the Nintendo Switch 2 being Nintendo's current console, does this version of the game truly keep up with the PlayStation 5 edition? In this video, we're gonna go over how the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero looks in comparison to the original Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5, how it plays, and we're also gonna test out the online mode. So let's just jump right into it. Whereas the Nintendo Switch 1 edition looked terrible in motion, the Switch 2 edition obviously is a big step above that. As you can see in this footage, the Switch 2 edition is very comparable to the PlayStation 5 in how the game looks, which should come as no surprise to anybody. Even games like Street Fighter 6 and Cyberpunk 2077 on the Switch 2 were very close to the PS5 editions. But one thing that may come as a surprise to many of you, because I know it did to me, is that the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of Sparking Zero runs at 30 frames per second, just like the original Switch edition. So it looks a lot closer to the PlayStation 5, but it runs at half the frame rate. However, just like I said in my last video, if you come from playing games at nothing but 60 FPS, playing something at 30 frames might be jarring for the first few minutes, but your eyes do adjust. It's a very consistent 30 frames during gameplay, as you can see in this footage. When it comes to the debate about frame rate in relation to this game, I think it's important to note that not even the PlayStation 5 runs this game at a perfect 60 FPS. It drops to as low as 40 FPS at times during very chaotic, particle effect heavy moments. The Switch 2 is a very powerful system. It's far more powerful than the original Nintendo Switch, but it's still not as capable as a base PlayStation 5. So to expect it to run this game at 60 might be a tall ask. Maybe if we had an option to use the original Switch version's graphics during online matches, the Switch 2 would probably be able to keep a steady 60 FPS, but that would have to be implemented for everybody, because if some people use the scaled back graphics but other people use the Switch 2 graphics, then we're gonna run into a lot of problems online that are not gonna be worth the trouble. I guess when it comes down to it is, do you want a smooth experience with very minimal stutters and performance drops, or do you want there to be frame drops every other moment? It seems that Bandai Namco's answer to that question was to target 30 frames in the Switch 2 edition, but to improve literally everything else about it. And as a result, the game looks and performs very well on the Nintendo Switch 2. Transitions from cutscenes to gameplay in the story mode tend to stutter in the original Switch, but in the Switch 2 it happens a lot less, and you see far smoother transitions more often than not. The grass in stages like the open field and Master Roshi's Island are actual flowing grass instead of flat green field like on the original Switch. Navigating menus and going through the character select screen is a far smoother experience on the Switch 2, obviously. It should go without saying that pretty much everything in this game is just 10 times better on the Switch 2 than on the original Switch. One thing I forgot to mention in my last review that I will mention here is that the DLC packs are not currently available for Nintendo Switch owners. So if you bought the Deluxe or Ultimate Edition, you're not yet gonna have access to Beast Gohan or any of the other DLC characters, aside from Goku Mini if you pre-order the Standard Edition. Bandai Namco is gonna provide an update on that whenever they're ready. The Switch and Switch 2 editions also currently have no ranked match system in place at the moment. That is as of release date today. It will be implemented at a later date. There is a notification about that in-game once you boot up. Also, if you thought that you were going to be able to have cross-play matches between Switch 1 and Switch 2 players in Sparking Zero, that is unfortunately not going to be possible. If you buy the Switch 1 version on the Switch 2, you will have to update it to the Switch 2 version in order to play online against Switch 2 players. When it comes to the online mode in the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game, as was stated earlier, there is no ranking system in place right now, but you can play online in ranked mode. I was not able to find any player matches or DP battles, but if you go to ranked match and set the battle rules to single battle, I found that I was matched up with many different players very quickly. So as of the recording of this video, player matches and ranked DP battles seem to be non-existent, but ranked single battles are very active. I recorded 5 different matches in about a 10-minute span with 3 different players, so I think that means it's pretty active. With time, it's just gonna get even better. And when it comes to the performance of the online, I was pleasantly surprised. Now, granted, I've only played against 3 opponents so far, and I don't know what their regions were, but the matches were very stable and felt very good. However, this game does have delay-based netcode, so it's not gonna come as a surprise to me when the bad connection starts showing up. But so far, so good. I only have so much time today, but I am gonna be recording online match gameplay with my commentary after I get some more time in training mode, so if that's something that you want to see, make sure to subscribe to the channel because online gameplay is something that I do on this channel quite a bit. So in conclusion, the Nintendo Switch 2 version of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is a very competent port. It falls slightly short of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series editions, but not in any meaningful way. The targeted 30 frames are very stable offline and online, which is very important. The graphics eclipse the Nintendo Switch 1 version and look very close and almost indistinguishable from the PlayStation 5 edition. If you're a Dragon Ball fan and you don't have a PlayStation 5, the Nintendo Switch 2 edition is a very good option. I would even say even if you have a PlayStation 5, the Switch 2 edition is still a good option. So if it is a step below, it's a very small step. I'm Switchblade, done.